Evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the third of this year's applications webinars. My name is Warren. I'm the Director of Operations at AYO, a role which is focused on the organisation of the behind-the-scenes work that's required to present each of our programs. So I'm particularly excited to be spending some time tonight talking about some of our more unique programs which provide opportunities to open career paths in non-performing fields within the classical music industry: composition, sound production, orchestral management, and words about music. Before we kick off, I would like to acknowledge that I'm hosting tonight's webinar from the lands of the Wadawurrung people and would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Thanks so much to all of you at home for tuning in this evening, and to those of you who submitted queries through our website. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A function if you're watching via Zoom, or in the comments section if you're streaming on Facebook, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. So I'll start tonight by introducing our three panellists. So joining me for tonight's discussion in sunny Perth, we have Mila Snyman. Mila was a participant in the AYO sound production course held in January 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago. Welcome, Mila.
Thank you so much.
We have Melody Eötvös. Melody tutored the AYO Composition program in 2019 and 20. She's currently a lecturer at composition at the University of Melbourne. She has a Master's in Music from the Royal Academy of Music in London and a Doctor of Music from the Indiana University in the US. So welcome to you, Dr. Melody.
Thank you.
And rounding out tonight's panel is Phillip Sametz. Phillip's tutored the AYO Words About music program for the last few years. He's currently in the midst of running an online version of this program this year. Phillip has a long history in the Australian classical music world, having worked for major orchestras, broadcasters. He's written countless program notes and utilised many other skills.
Thank you, Warren. Great to be here.
Well, thank you all for joining me tonight. Whilst we're here to talk about four rather special AYO programs, I wanted to begin by talking more generally about National Music Camp, which is where these programs will exist in 2022, and hopefully hearing about some of the panel's experiences. So National Music Camp is a key part of the AYO calendar, and it dates back to 1948, when the first camp was organised by music teachers Ruth Alexander and John Bishop, and it was held in the beachside town of Point Lonsdale in Victoria. National Music Camp, or NMC as it's fondly known, has grown through the years, and in more recent times seen over 200 musicians aged between 14 and 22 descend on Adelaide each January, creating 3 orchestras and spending 2 weeks working with a variety of tutors, artists and conductors from around Australia and abroad. As the camp has evolved over the years, additional programs have been included to help nurture future composers, sound engineers and producers, music journalists and arts administrators. Now, my first National Music Camp experience was in January 2016 and was held in Canberra. I remember it being absolutely non-stop for 2 weeks, and despite the very tiring schedule, which was often sort of 9 AM in the morning through to 9 PM each day, there was this continued sense of excitement from everyone involved. It'd be great to hear from each of you on the panel a bit about your first impression of National Music Camp. Melody, could we start with you?
Okay, so Adelaide, to begin with, is a beautiful city. It's always exciting to go to new places, and Adelaide was definitely more on the new side for me. So it was, excitement just from that very first point. But yeah, the camp itself, so many students are there. So you've got that wonderful spirit of camaraderie going on. And even from the composition perspective, all of the composers that I've known to come into the program have networked out into the performers, which I think is wonderful. Like they've all made friends, and they're talking to everybody, and whether they're roommates or whatever. But definitely the spirit of camaraderie is something that I noticed from the very beginning. So that's definitely my favorite part, I think.
Great. Phillip, you've been on a few camps.
Yes, I've been lucky enough, I think 19 and 20. I was a newbie in 2019. I'd never been to music camp before. I was blown away by the intensity of it. It's a really full-on 2 weeks, like you said, Warren. There's a great sense of joy, exaltation. I think the thrill of being with like-minded people for 2 weeks, making music. I think admiration from my point of view at the kind of brilliant organisation of it all, when you think about how much is going on, the intensity of it, and I would say the heat. Adelaide in January, it's not Arctic. It's
Nope.
yeah, I think those are the, and also just there are hijinks, which is to be expected. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Great. Now, Mila, you arrived at camp as a participant, so coming across from Perth. So you would have landed at the airport amongst a whole lot of other participants. How was that?
It was very daunting, to be honest, but my music camp was in Adelaide as well, so it was very exciting because I've never been to Adelaide, and luckily there's a lot of musicians from Perth that went on camp, so I kind of spotted a couple of fellow musicians on the plane. But it was a really good experience to fly out by myself and feel adult-like. But when I got to the Adelaide campus, it was just the diversity of talents and people were astonishing, and I felt so privileged to be able to be one of them, and I learned so much. It's a very intense 2 weeks, but the quantity that I've learned and the quality of what I learned, I'll never forget.
Great. So as I think everyone mentioned, National Music Camp is a really intense, action-packed experience, and that's particularly true of the Orchestral Management program. Those that participate in this program get some rather fast-tracked real-world experience by taking responsibility for managing all of the orchestras at camp. They look after their rehearsals and all of the performance activities during the 2 weeks. There's opportunities during the program to try on lots of different hats, from being a stage manager, an orchestral manager, a librarian, to being an artist liaison. The orchestral management participants are usually the first to arrive each day and generally the last to leave. Whilst the orchestras are rehearsing, they also do sessions that are run by the tutor with a variety of guest speakers, exploring the different roles and areas that exist in the industry, and looking at the many different types of jobs and tasks that you might consider under the orchestral management umbrella. And many people that you do that particular program use it as a springboard into other jobs in the industry. Participants from recent years are currently working at some organisations, including Opera Australia, the Melbourne Symphony, Musica Viva, Orchestra Victoria, and the Australian Chamber Orchestra, just to name drop a few. Now, Mila, you attended National Music Camp as a participant of the sound production course. Could you tell us a bit about what encouraged you to apply for this course, and then maybe discuss some of the things that you learned whilst at camp?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated school in 2018, and then as my type of gap year, I studied sound production at TAFE. And just a disclaimer, you don't need to do this to be able to participate in the sound production course. But so at TAFE, you obviously record bands and small gigs, but I've played cello all my life. So my passions lied in classical music. And then I saw an ad for this national camp and sound production pop up on my Facebook. And I was like, oh, I need to sign up for this. And so luckily enough, I was able to be a part of it. If you have a strong passion for sound production and recording sound, and actually having the opportunity to record 100-piece orchestra, it's really an opportunity that I just couldn't miss. In the sound production course, we are normally the first ones that are there as well before the musicians arrive, to make sure that our mics are still standing all good. And then if the orchestral management team are setting up, then we need to watch that they don't bump any of the expensive equipment or how our leads are running. When the orchestra is practicing their pieces and doing dress rehearsals, we will record them just to see what it sounds like. We have like a little studio under the stage. It's very cool. So we're in our little sound cave, and we have set up cameras as well, so we can also see what's going on. So it was really like our kind of bat cave for sound. It was heaps of fun. We also did a lot of smaller side projects. So we worked with Words About Music so that they can record their pieces. And our tutor of that year was Jakob, and he was just so knowledgeable. He worked with the Adelaide Symphony, and so he just had years of experience, and he told us little snippets every day and gave us good lectures if we did something wrong. But it was a very enriching experience.
Oh, great. Now, you mentioned you did some things with the Words About Music course. Could you tell us about how the sound production course coexists with some of the other programs and the sort of interaction you had with participants that weren't doing your course?
Yeah, sure. So with Words About Music, I don't really know what they needed to do, but they wrote a piece and they needed to record it, so they were able to share it. And so we showed them how certain recording equipment functions, so that they can record, and then how we used, during the sound production course, we used a software called Reaper. So we familiarized them with some of the basic functions of Reaper so that they could edit and kind of make a finished product of their piece.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of 2 weeks, how many minutes of music do you think you ended up recording?
So I had to have a long think about this one. Probably finished product, probably about 13 hours of music, because there were 2 concerts, 2 major concerts, and then smaller concerts in between. But draft music and all of that must have been more than at least 25 hours of music, which is really awesome. I had to look back. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Now, one of the orchestras that you would have been involved in recording would have been the Composition Ensemble, which is a small orchestra or a sinfonietta consisting of the National Music Camp tutor team. Now, this ensemble rehearses and performs 4 brand new works written as part of each year's camp by the composition students. So, Melody, could you tell us a bit about what happens from the point where someone's offered a position in the composition program to the point where there's an orchestra on stage of the AYO tutors, who are some of the best musicians in the country?
Incredible.
Workshopping their piece. Do the composers write this entirely at camp?
No, they do not. That idea has been abandoned just to eliminate the stress on the students. So the deal is that by the time you get to camp, you've finished all or most of the piece. And the point of doing that is to make sure that we have enough time to discuss it in sessions one-on-one with the composition tutor, and if there's anything that does need to be tweaked before the first rehearsal at the beginning of the second week, then we have time to do that. However, before camp starts, I believe it's new procedure for us to have online meetings to discuss the progress of the work. So we do get contacts and to check in with you to see how the work in progress is coming along.
Great. Now, whilst the composition students are at camp, I know they do a lot of sort of hiding away and working on scores. Maybe, I know it changes a bit each year, but could you give us an idea of the sort of other activities that happened in the composition course when you were tutoring?
So one of the things that we loved doing was actually doing workshops with instrumentalists from sourcing throughout the camp. So mostly tutors, but if there are guest musicians that are at the camp that certain year. Like in 2020 was William Barton with his didgeridoo. He came and gave us a workshop for a couple of hours, and it was incredible. Even I got something from it. But yeah, workshopping with actual musicians, and I find this is very helpful for students, especially with instruments like harp. Quite often coming in to this program, you'll be potentially writing for harp properly for the first time. So workshopping with, you know, whoever the harp tutor is incredibly valuable. And we do that more intensely over the first week. So we get up to that kind of work, but we also take advantage of Adelaide itself. When 2019 and 2020, we would do expeditions to the gallery just to try and absorb some extra musical sources from outside of the musical world, to pick up on whatever was going on in Adelaide, exhibition wise. That was really fun. And we also do a lot of sessions where we talk about music, obviously, certain pieces that we're interested in, score reading, orchestral reading, very important, analysis, and let me think, there's always the famous cricket match that happens. The composers tried to get involved. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that goes on, and we also try to give you enough time to actually get some composing done yourself, if you need to spend a little bit more time on your piece. So we usually have later morning starts, which is always nice.
Oh, that's very nice. It's a good reason to do the course. Yeah. I might do it. We've just had a question come in on the chat. Someone's just asked about what sort of, or what type of music they'd be creating if they were involved in the program. Is there a stylistic requirement, or is it fairly open? Or
it's incredibly open, and the answer to that is, what kind of music are you creating? And that's what we want to hear. We don't want you to try and be somebody else. It's absolutely 100% what are you working on, what interests you, and I believe it's important to try and get a good spread of diversity when it comes to composition applicants. So we usually have quite a few different composers coming in that are working on different stuff with different ideas, different concepts, different interests.
Great. Okay. Now the fourth course we're talking about tonight, Words About Music, covers a variety of music journalistic areas. Phillip, you've been tutoring the course now for a couple of years. What sort of things might one end up doing as part of the WHAM course?
Well, in a way, you articulate what goes on at camp for the audience for camp, which is, the audience is the people at camp, and the audience is people who come to the performances. It's for people who consume AYO material online as well. So it's really, there's a lot of variety. First of all, you're writing all the program notes for the major public performances that take place. You're contributing to the beautiful document that comes out right at the end of camp, which at the moment is a calendar called Musica Fever. It's got a very long history, that document, I know. In its current form, it's a calendar with lots and lots of fabulous editorial in it, which the Words About Music cohort creates. And in a way, that's a kind of wonderful souvenir of the 2 weeks, a pictorial souvenir, an editorial souvenir. It contains usually lots of great interviews with participants at camp, with tutors. It can contain some very thoughtful pieces too, about music, about performance practice, about a whole range of things. I encourage the participants to blog as well, because the wonderful AYO marketing team is very encouraging of the participants creating blogs that can be reflections on the repertoire that's being performed, on a particular aspect of camp, on perhaps on one of the conductors or on one of the soloists. There's opportunities to present performances from the stage as well, and given that every musician really should be great at talking about what they do, I'm really encouraging the participants in WHAM to be able to engagingly and coherently and present a performance from the stage just for a couple of minutes. It sounds simple, but doing it well and doing it in a way that you feel great also is quite tricky. And it's great working with the young people on this. And in fact, I'm pretty sure I've hopefully uh, been responsible for making some people go from I couldn't possibly do that to actually feeling pretty comfortable about it. I hope. And it's wonderful when it works. It really is. There's opportunities to create material for the AYO social media channels. And there's podcasting opportunities too, which is one of the things that that Mila was alluding to before. So there's a great deal to be done, and in some ways there's also an opportunity to do stuff spontaneously. Some things don't really happen until you're at camp and somebody in the cohort gets an idea. And that's also a wonderful thing to behold.
Excellent. Now, if someone loves, say, writing, but they hate public speaking, can they still do the course?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're hating public speaking. Uh, I'd like to think that there's room to move there. I'd like to think that we can get to a point where, and look, it is really it's not a major part of what we do in WAM, but I just think if you're going to communicate beautifully on the page and on the screen, it's also important that you at least start to think about how you communicate in person. If we are living in a world where portfolio careers are a reality, then I think it's a bit of a non-negotiable skill to be able to stand in front of a group of people and be articulate, even if it's only for a minute or so.
Okay. Now, camp has a few long-held traditions. You mentioned that the WAM group work on Musica Fever, which is a very clever play on words, and a lovely departing memento each year. Melody touched on the cricket match just before, and she mentioned that the composition cohort tries to get involved. Phillip, what are your expectations of the WAM participants and the cricket match?
Look, I would like to think they would take part. I would like to think they would take part enthusiastically, but don't forget, it is the responsibility of the WAM cohort to also report on the cricket match accurately and with enthusiasm.
Okay, well, given that the students are yet to win a game, they could perhaps do that in advance. Talk about
Look,
the wonderful.
there's colour and movement on the night that just needs to be, you really have to be there. You know that, Warren.
Indeed. Now, we've had a few questions come in around the application process for these programs. The first of which I'm happy to field, and the question is, who can apply for these programs? So the orchestral management, the sound production, and the WAM, or Words About Music courses, are open to participants aged 18 to 30 as at the 1st of January 2022. And the composition course caters for a slightly larger bracket with applicants eligible if they're between 16 and 30 as at the 1st of January 2022. How do you apply? So if you go to the AYO website and carefully check the requirements for each course, as it does differ a little between the different courses. You'll need to submit various documents, and you may need to do an interview as well. So each course within the requirements asks for submission of a CV and a written statement. Phillip, as our words expert, when someone's submitting a CV for these courses, what should they keep in mind?
Turning mute off will be a great help. In addition to a CV, if you submit an application to Words About Music, you'll be asked to submit an example of something you've written yourself, some music writing that you admire. You'll need to tell us why you admire it, by the way, and a statement explaining why you want to do the course. And I would keep in mind when you're creating your application that the ability to communicate well is something at which everyone in our profession can excel. So whatever path you're choosing to follow in your musical life, whether you're planning to focus on performance, whether you're planning to focus on arts admin, whether you're planning to focus on orchestral management, to me, communicating well is, it's part of your Swiss Army knife, if you like. It's sort of basic kit for anyone who wants a life in music. When you think about it, you will be asked, if you're a musician, what made you choose to perform this piece? What does a listener know that's going to help them enjoy your performance more? What might motivate someone to attend a performance or watch it online? An ability to explain these things well is bound to benefit your working life in and around music. So just to go back to the point before when I said a piece of music writing you admire, this could be by Alex Ross or Anna Goldsworthy or whomever you particularly like to read. But I'm interested in finding out why that particular piece of writing speaks to you when you include it as an example in your Words About Music application.
Great. Okay, now the sound production, the orchestral management and the WAM application process all involve an interview, which this year is done as a Zoom video call, involving the tutor of the course and a member of the AYO staff team. Every applicant who submits their application and their portfolio is given an interview, and they last for around 10 to 15 minutes. Mila, as an applicant that's done one of these, was the interview a daunting experience?
I mean, any interview of any kind, I feel, is a bit of a daunting experience, but I really wanted to be a part of the course, so I gave it my all. But in saying that, I was really myself. So they ask questions about your passions and what you may know of sound production so far. And I think a sneaky thing was that I stated that I have a huge passion for movie soundtracks, and then that hit off with the tutor that was hosting the interview. So I think I got a tick in that square. So it's just really express what you're interested in, and that'll be enough. And if you're really passionate about it, it will come across in the interview. So don't need to stress, but be prepared is all I'm saying.
Great. Now, in my role at AYO, I often sit on these interviews. The last few years I sat on the orchestral management ones with the tutors for those courses. And yeah, we're keen to find out more about each applicant and their interests in the course, as well as career goals and areas within the industry that are of particular interest to you. And where possible, we even use that information to try and tailor the course each year for those that get in, so it's as relevant to people's interests as possible. We're wanting to make sure that the people that get offered positions understand what they're signing up for as well. And if possible, we want to be able to see how your participation in the program will help you with your own aspirations and career goals. Now, Phillip, the requirements for the WAM course ask for an example of excellent writing. Could you elaborate on this requirement a little bit? And could I submit something that you've written?
Well, you could, and that would be very flattering. But really, the aim of this is to help me and the other members of the interview team find out, how you hope to write and how you hope to communicate. Is there someone out there who inspires you? We're trying to find out about your interests as a communicator and what you particularly want to focus on. So I would encourage you to be authentic, if I can put it that way. Yeah.
Great. Okay, Melody, question for you. The composition applications do not require an interview. Instead, they ask for examples of recent composition work. Someone has asked if there's a best type of composition for submitting, say if they should submit an orchestral work or a chamber work or solo works. Could you talk a little bit about what the applicants should submit as examples of their work, and maybe a bit about what the panel is looking for when they work through these?
So for the youth that I was participating in this, when it comes to submitting your work for consideration, definitely your most recent work is always helpful because it helps us, understand where you are at the moment and therefore where you will be when you're at camp. But so far as instrumentation is concerned, I wouldn't focus too much on that. Like if you're thinking, I'm going to try and write a quick orchestral piece to, show my orchestral chops, and you haven't written an orchestral piece before, it might not go as well as you planned. So what I would advise is submit the music that best represents who you are as a composer, whether it's a piano solo or a trumpet solo or a string quartet or orchestra piece. Just go with your gut on this one, and choose what you think is the best representation of you. And also what I found is really helpful, it's a little bit sneaky, but if you have a SoundCloud account out there or a YouTube, what are they called, channels, I usually go and do a little bit of investigating as well, because as I can remember back to when I was submitting music for these kind of things, and I didn't always choose my best pieces. I chose what I thought was, showy or what people wanted to see. I didn't trust my gut enough. So what I do now in the reverse position of that is to do a little digging myself. And if you do have another SoundCloud or YouTube stream out there, I will go and listen to your other pieces just to get a broader scope of who you are as a composer. And it helps me get a better kind of idea of what you really want to be doing. And from there, I'm able to make a better choice, and we're able to make a better choice about whether you're going to get anything from the camp, which of course you will. So that's, hopefully that answers the question.
Now, if an applicant doesn't have a performance recording of a work they're submitting, should they submit, say, a computer-generated sound file instead?
I'm going to say yes.
Yep.
Yes, because that will save us time having to go to a piano or an instrument and kind of trying to pick our way through your composition. Whether it's really dodgy MIDI or whatever it is that you're submitting, any kind of sound file is going to give us a much faster, accessible way to get an idea of your music.
Great. Okay. Now we've had a question here asking if you can apply for more than one course. So the answer to this, or the short answer to this, is yes. You are welcome to apply for as many AYO programs as you are eligible each year. So there's the one application fee, and that covers you applying for as many different programs and on as many different instruments or different streams as you want. Of course, the small caveat to that is some AYO programs happen at the same time. In particular, the 4 that we're discussing in detail tonight, as well as the National Music Camp Orchestral Program. So if you were to apply and be successful for more than one course that runs at the same time as each other, then you would get the opportunity to choose which program you most wanted to do. So the applications for the different programs that we're discussing are all assessed separately, and applying for more than one would not affect your other application in any way. So if you have interest in all of these fields, I would encourage, and if the rest of the panel agree with me, that you should put your hat in the ring for every opportunity you get. Okay, so we'll move on to some more questions. Someone has asked, does attending these programs at AYO look good on their resume? Maybe everyone might have a response to this. Mila, have you put this on your resume?
I most certainly have. I actually got an interview at the Perth Concert Hall, which I did probably 2 weeks before Miss Corona broke out. So unfortunately, I haven't gotten a job in the field yet, but it made such an impression that I got that interview really quickly. So absolutely put it on your resume. It's a very intense experience, and it provides so much information that you're probably on a higher level than most other sound production people in the first place. So it's a yes from me, definitely.
Great. Phillip, I don't know if you use a resume these days, but
I think, look, I'd say based on the number of people who've been through Words About Music in the past decade, they're right through the industry now in a whole range of communications roles. Some of them have gone into radio. Some of them are combining a career as performer and arts administrator. I mean, I would have to say, based on the people I know in the industry who've come through WAM in recent years, I'd say absolutely.
great. Melody, did you want to add to that?
Another absolutely.
Yeah, great. And I can say in regards to the orchestral management course, I get phone calls fairly regularly from partner organizations in the industry that are looking for people that are wanting to get in and get jobs and are interested, and they regularly call AYO and sort of ask who's done our program. I in fact fielded one of these calls today, and yeah, so I would suggest that speaks volumes. If you want to go and work somewhere in the industry, then why not? Okay, let's move on. The next thing we have a question on how many positions are available in each program. So this can change a little bit each year. Our usual numbers for these courses are 2 positions in the sound production course, 4 positions in the composition course, 4 positions in the WAM course, and 8 positions in the orchestral management course. Sometimes we're able to take more people in some of those courses. It just sort of depends on the greater picture of everything that's being organized. Sometimes we can't take as many positions as well, but that's what we normally aim to take. Now I have another person here that says they love playing their instrument, which happens to be the violin, but they're not sure that they want to make it their career. And they're asking, should they consider applying for some of these programs, even if they don't have much experience in these fields? Phillip, would you like to take this one to start with?
Look, I think realistically, if everyone who applied for these courses had a lot of experience, they might not need to apply for the courses. So I'm inclined to think if really the primary requisite from my point of view is that you want to be able to communicate well about what you do, and you're coming into the course ready to learn and be engaged with what's happening at camp. That's really the most important thing, because if I think about one of the fabulous things about doing this course at camp, you've got hundreds of participants, you have dozens of tutors, and from an editorial point of view, there are your stories all around you. You have composers in the room. You have people playing every orchestral instrument imaginable, and they all have a great story to tell. They all have opinions about music. They have fascinating backgrounds in music performance. And all of these things are potentially stories for you as a writer. So I would say if you come prepared to get amongst it, and you want to be able to communicate well, that's really the most important thing.
Great. Melody, if someone dabbles a bit in composition, should they consider this?
This is a tricky question because there is a little bit more, because of the type of piece that you're expected to write when you come to AYO, which is the Sinfonietta, which honestly is throwing you in the deep end a little bit, a one of everything orchestra. It's a little bit challenging, but from that, I mean, there are so many composers that have started later in life. Brett Dean is a fantastic example of that. So, throwing in the deep end isn't necessarily a bad thing. And if you're passionate about it and you've got, unique individual ideas that you want to be able to express in music, absolutely go for it. Why not?
Yeah. And then Mila, you mentioned that you were doing some sound production at TAFE before you did this course. Do you think you would have got as much out of the course even if you weren't already venturing down that path?
Oh, absolutely. From the first day that you arrive at AYO, it's back to basics. You go through all of the basics, all areas of uncertainty is covered. So if you don't have much knowledge in the area, it's fairly simple to gain a good idea and then go from there 100%.
Excellent. And I would recommend, if you're wanting to do music of some sort as a career but not as performance, and you're really not sure, and some of these other more specific courses maybe aren't necessarily where you're wanting to head, the Orchestral Management program gives a really good overview of so many different roles that you could consider in the industry, and it sets you up to be able to walk in somewhere and set a stage and understand all the basics of a major arts organization. So we've had another question on the chat just before we get to the end of tonight. Someone's just asked how they can make their written statement stand out. So I think I'll ask for some responses here, but from my opinion, I would say that you should, if you're applying, especially for the orchestral management course, we don't want to read lots of words. We want to read honest words that really sum up your situation. And writing a full A4 page because you can is not necessarily a benefit to you here, and a well-constructed paragraph or two that's really specific about where you're at and what you're hoping to get from the course, I would rather read, and I would find that demonstrates that you know what you're hoping to get at, better than something that demonstrates that you can use a lot of words. There's definitely no word count for some of these. I know, Phillip, for the WAM, there is a word count for some of the applications, but being concise will always be in your favor. Melody or Phillip, do you want to add to that question at all? No. So that, just to sum up, concise is good. Well, we're nearing the end of tonight's webinar. We're just about out of time, but before we finish up, I wanted to ask each of the panel if they wouldn't mind sharing, if they have any, a favourite memory from their time at National Music Camp. Mila, do you want to go first?
Cool. So I had to have a long, hard think about this question because so much happens in the 2 weeks. Like, it's kind of hard to keep track sometimes of what's happening, but my favorite bit definitely was being able to record William Barton, which is the most amazing didgeridoo player, and to see his passion for his instrument on stage backed up by a 100-piece orchestra is something that I'll never forget. And I've actually saved the recordings and I listen to them now and then because it was just such an amazing opportunity that I'll never forget. Yeah.
Oh, great. Phillip, do you have a memory you'd like to share?
Look, I do. I have to say, one of the most gratifying things was seeing the WAM cohort really get amongst it at camp, and some really great stories resulted. One of my favourite memories is one of the cohort was saying to me in the hub on campus in the middle of the day when everyone was on a break and there were just hundreds of people there. She said to me, I'd really like to do a piece on how recently a piece of music needs to be written that would benefit from a historically informed approach. You know, there must be 20th century pieces that would benefit from the kind of approach that's been applied to music of the Baroque and the classical period. And I said, look, there's Rachel Beasley right there, one of the tutors at camp. Why don't you go and have a chat to her? And she just sort of got up, went and had a chat to Rachel, and the piece wound up in Musica Fever a week later. And to me, that was gold, because that's what camp is all about. And I've no doubt that, you know, and that person, that whammer who was working with me has now made a fantastic connection.
Fantastic. And Melody?
For me, it's got to be the concert. At the end of those 2 weeks, seeing the 4 composers and having their work come into being the way that they want it, because that final performance, the performance has that extra adrenaline and everyone's just taking it that extra mile, and seeing the composers' faces, they're like, yeah, that's what I meant. And it's so much hard work, and just seeing it all just happen it's got to be the best thing by far.
Yeah, totally. I love seeing as we hit the sort of the tail end of camp, and there's sort of concert every couple of hours almost for the last few days, and the camaraderie of everyone involved. The orchestral management students have, in the second week, really got used to their stage management responsibilities, and one of the challenging concerts that they run most years is the brass and percussion concert, which normally consists of sort of one piece of brass musicians followed by one piece of elaborate percussion followed by another piece with no percussion on stage. And the cheer that the orchestral management students will often get from the musicians on stage later that night, when they've finally finished for the day and they come back to socialize, is always nice to see. So, well, thank you to everyone at home for tuning in this evening. For anyone that submitted a question that we haven't got to this evening, we'll be responding to those over email over the coming days. Or if you have further questions about applying, then please get in touch with us by email, which is info@ayo.com.au, or give us a call on 1300 668 500. Next week, we will be presenting a webinar that discusses considerations for recording your audition video. So if you're applying for one of our instrumental programs, I'd recommend joining that session next Thursday, which will be hosted by AYO's Music and Operations Coordinator, Nathan Walton. Finally, just a huge thank you to our 3 amazing panelists, Melody, Mila, and Phillip. Thank you all for joining us and for answering everyone's questions and for being just really good sports. So that's all from us. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.